Hello, my name is Soida, and with me is Zesty. How are you, Zesty?
Good. How are you?
Great, great, great. I'm just here to introduce a game called Starcraft 2 to my channel for anybody who doesn't know about it. And obviously, this is going to be posted to teamliquid.net. So they already know about it, but we have an interesting time on our hands, which is Cheeseadelphia is coming back. So it's the second American tournament within 2 months in this busy schedule that we have this summer, and it's a $4,000 crowdfunded prize pool taking place in Philadelphia on June 14th. And you're a main contributor to that tournament. So you're sponsoring it and you're playing in it. I just want to get your insight and vision of where this event will go, and overall for this interview to talk about your unique approach to learning and teaching the game to lower ranked players on your stream. So first off, just share with us how this event was brought together after an uncertain period of funding for how this particular tournament was made.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what I know from my perspective, but I really am just a patsy. I found out that the tournament was potentially in question at the last Cheeseadelphia, and being a player myself, I selfishly wanted to make sure that the tournament was happening. So I spoke with Chelsea Fan and Joe, and those are the guys, all the guys at the local host in Philadelphia. Those are the guys really with the brains behind it, but. I kind of let them know that I would definitely be willing to contribute some of the price pool just because I really love local lands and I hadn't been to too many. I hadn't had an opportunity to go to too many throughout, even though I've been playing for 15 years. I hadn't really gone physically anywhere. And so, having just starting to go to these events, I really wanted to make sure that they continued for as long as possible so that I could get to go and continue to play and continue to meet cool people. So that's all I really have to do with it. The all credit really goes to the champs at the local host in Philadelphia.
Okay. And most people don't know this about you, but you placed top eight at the previous tournament with a lower prize pool. But what do you feel your chances are in this one, being that the prize pool is so high and we have players like Barry Crunch, we have other top placers, Future. I think the tournament's a little bit more stacked this time around, don't you think?
Yeah, I was incredibly lucky to place top eight when I did. I there are players who have far more deserving than I was who did not place top eight. So I ended up getting the right bracket gods and got pulled off the right upset wins in order to get there. So I'm super glad that I did. I think there's one particularly interesting game between myself and Chelsea fan that went down to the wire. Everyone was kind of watching, cheering. It's funny because it was an extremely messy game where I think I was very ahead very early and then almost through the game. And yet everyone afterwards was telling me that that was the most exciting game to watch. And I just reflected on the fact that the worse you do, the more interesting StarCraft you create sometimes. So it's kind of a little bit of irony there.
All right.
That was a game
And
that I was. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. And I want to touch on that. You almost threw the game and your philosophy. I want to touch on your philosophy in finishing games out because I've seen you on your stream plenty of games where you should lose, but you don't, and you stick to it. And most players would have quit. So what's your approach, in especially in a tournament scenario? Like, how are you thinking those things out?
I think a lot of I think when you realize just how much if you're not playing at the absolute top level, when you realize just how many times, like you say, people tend to know what advantages they've eked out for themselves, and so when they realize that they're ahead in the way somehow get far more, and so sort of in these sorts of ways, people go from completely winning to throne all the time, even in the grandmaster levels, and so knowing that, I think that it's really good and important to play as long as you if you're not in a tournament game you should play as long as you think you're getting value, you're actually learning something. And if you're in a tournament game you should play until it's clear that every way that you know to get back in the game has been clearly demonstrated by your opponent that they can cut you off. And so it's not as simple as saying, oh, I'm behind in these three ways that like I typically would want to be ahead to be objectively ahead. But you know, you can still think about, okay, I have to have the opponent has to prove that he knows how to win this game, just like you have to prove that you know how to win the game if it, the shoe's on the other foot. So I think that there's always a time whenever you've played against someone that you know a lot and you know that they know how to close out a game, it's a little bit rude to stay in. But a lot of times, if you are not, you know, this is a tournament game, you haven't played this person before, you know, it's probably okay to pull out every trick in the book to try to.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay, you're cutting out sometimes here and there, and I don't have an editor, but that's completely fine. We're
I'll
gonna
try to
post
try
this
to speak closer to the mic.
raw, so it doesn't matter. But I think the audience gets your point, and it's that most players would quit, but you want your opponent to show that they do indeed know how to close the game out because you know how to come back. Is that right?
Yeah, if that's the case, it's always good to try until the opponent proves that they know how to close the game out. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Now let's talk about your coaching. I think that's your main draw to your stream, and you've been increasing your viewer count ever since. Is like you coach mostly every stream, is that correct?
No, I don't. I really don't coach all that much. It's always available whenever I stream, um, and I have tried to make that thing that's available to people, but it's actually surprising how little people actually take that offer up. Um, it can be a bit weird because what I would like to do is I would like to help people. I think that I have nothing against coaches that charge money. I think that it's absolutely correct to charge money, and you know, if you spend a lot of time building a skill, you know, it's reasonable to assume that you should charge people to help them out and with your skill. When I taught piano, even though I'm not a particularly accomplished pianist, I'm good enough, and a friend of mine heard me playing at a party and wanted me to teach their daughter to play, which I told them there's probably you can get someone else to do it. They said, no, 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 we'd love for you to come do it. I charged them to do it, even though we're friends, just because, you know, it's a skill. I'm spending time in doing it. But for me, I also know that a lot of people, especially in StarCraft, um, don't necessarily have the disposable income where they're trying to they feel comfortable paying a whole lot and they still want to get better. And I want to give people an opportunity with affordable coaching options to even be free, potentially, like, you know, kind of work with people on their situation and make sure that they feel like they can get to a level of proficiency and enjoy the game. Because the biggest reason I saw is that I saw that a lot of people got extremely mentally burned out by playing StarCraft. And I've certainly been there myself. And so that's kind of why I also thought about it too. And frankly, there's tons of coaches. There's kind of two, if you're getting coached, there's two areas that you can get coached in my opinion, like broadly speaking. One being the mechanics of how to play the game, the strategy, the raw numbers. If they build this, you build that, these sorts of things. And that's one very important part of coaching that I've seen covered a lot. But then the other part of coaching that people often don't really hit on is like when someone says breaking stuff down to more core habits and mindsets. And so I kind of wanted to, I've spent a lot of time learning how to learn. One of my favorite books is The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. Anyone reading should look that up. And he delves a lot into Josh Waitzkin was a chess player out of New York City back in the 80s who was a child prodigy. He was a lot of people said he was going to be the next Bobby Fischer. He kind of flamed out and ended up switching to Tai Chi Chuan and went and became the world championship in the martial arts tournament in Taiwan. So his book had a profound impact on me. It's very interesting. You either love it or hate it, but what I realized was that like regardless of what you're learning, there's a mindset and there's a way to learn, and you can only figure it out. It's hard to put into words. You have to learn something at a very high level to start to understand how to learn it at a very high level. And so for me, I sought to do that in a lot of areas of my life. Starcraft being kind of like one of the most pointed ones. And so even I realized, even though I had been playing for, at the time 13 years, I was had very poor learning habits, and I was just bashing my head against the wall, and I was trying to get better by brute force, not really understanding good habits and how to learn. And so I've, over the last few years, really tried to start to address those and learn in a different way. And it's been amazing um, the amount of enjoyment I've gotten out of the game. And it's gone from a very frustrating experience to now it's it still has frustrations, but it's overall a much more enjoyable experience. And I wanted to share that with other people and teach people how to approach it and change the way that they learn and interact and play with StarCraft to be a more enjoyable experience.
Great. And do you think there's some sort of real life impact this game has in terms of your approach of learning it, with build timings, with committing to certain tactics that you teach? Do you think that this game can train your mind in a certain way to maybe become a better thinker, or because most people, like you said, they just go brute force into this game. So what kind of approach do you think this game naturally develops
Yeah,
from playing?
I think that there is kind of two major. Obviously, there's the first level analysis of like, okay, I am a StarCraft player. I understand that time is very important, and a lot of times people say everything's a race in StarCraft, right? You're racing to get your economy up. You're racing to get your army out. You're racing to get there and attack here while you're attacking there. And so, like, being aware of time and realizing that like seconds spent lollygagging is seconds that your opponent's getting ahead in the race, that's something that is kind of, you could apply to real life. Like if you're sitting around and you're doom scrolling on your phone for 5 minutes, it's, you might think in the moment that's 5 minutes, like what's really the big deal? But if you've played StarCraft at a high level, you know that like 5 minutes is a long time, and that time you spent kind of just vegging out, someone else could have spent it in a much more productive way. And I think you have to be careful, because if you take this too much to its logical conclusion, you start to look at any amount of downtime or any amount of not going as like, oh my God, someone else is getting ahead. And so you have to be careful with that mindset, but just understanding that you should move more purposely through life, because when you're not being purposeful with what you're doing, like if you're going to scroll your phone, purposefully know, okay, I'm taking a break, I'm relaxing, and I'm looking at my phone. How long am I going to look at my phone for? Rather than just doom scrolling for 5 minutes, not thinking about it, and 5 minutes turns into an hour and a half, and all of a sudden, what have you done for the last hour and a half that is in line with your goals? Absolutely nothing. And then that also has an effect that it can tilt you and kind of take you off course. So there are like first level like things I think you can learn from StarCraft and life, just very broadly apply. But then the other thing is, um, like I said, just how the meta level analysis of how do you approach becoming good at StarCraft. You realize that there are some ways you can become good at StarCraft that are very, brute force hammery, that, you will get lots of results, but eventually you start to decline in in the results that you get. And then there are ways that you can take a step back and look at how are you structuring how you approach the game, where are you getting help from, what sort of drills are you doing, what thinking about like what went right and what went wrong, not just in the game but in like the practice session. These sort of like skills also are extremely useful, I think, when you can take those skills and say, how do I critically think about all like systems, if I'm learning computer science because I'm a computer, I want to be a programmer, and so I'm taking a computer science degree. um, those same sort of skills are applicable to that. If you're learning how to like throw a frisbee because like you just like, you think, oh man, I'd really like to go out in the park with those guys and throw a frisbee, but never have before, you can start to apply these same sort of like learning cycles to those, to anything that you really do in your life. And I think that's where even the most value comes from, playing StarCraft and pursuing it at a higher level.
No, great. Now I want to touch on uh, practice regimens, because once you told me I've taken your coaching before, do not play for a larger amount of time per day. You want to go for shorter sessions and more targeted sessions. Is that correct? Is that the fundamental way to approach things? I know you've taken coaching from players like Uko, and they're very high ranked. So, is that the way to go?
Um, I would say that there is no the really unfortunate answer is there is no one way to go. You can give broad advice that's typically it'll typically hold true, but the first thing you have to do is you have to every learner must take responsibility for their own learning, and they must introspect and understand what works for them and what doesn't. Uko, he played for 16-hour days sometimes, and he was just the man was a machine. He could just go go go, and it worked for him. I do think it had limitations. I think he probably plateaued at some point and he needed to take a step back and relook at his learning system. But he could go for 8 hours straight and pretty much get most of the value out of practice. And that's one of his strengths, and that's one of the things that he leveraged to get as high as he did. Most people, but you need to look inside yourself and ask yourself. I am a busy person. I've got lots of stuff. Me personally, I have I just started a company. I'm training for a half marathon. I'm moving pretty soon. I would like to, I've got all these things that I need to bounce my time on. I don't have the time to play 8 hours of Starcraft and have only the first two of those hours be have the last 6 hours be me kind of mindlessly and getting 2% benefit. So if you are wanting to improve as fast as you can, as well as have it be a more sustainable thing in your life, I think you need to look at your practice sessions and say, how long am I focused in for? How long am I playing? And actually, I play a game, I win or lose, I think about, okay, what things did I learn about this game? What things really worked, what things didn't work. I wonder how I can target, can I devise something, what mechanics did I fail? Is there a theme in the mechanics I failed? Can I devise a way to practice those mechanics outside of the context of a game? Whenever you're not able to perform the critical level of thinking during the game and after the game, but most importantly after the game, during the game, and during the game, if you start making sloppy mistakes that you start saying, oh, that mistake doesn't matter, I'm just, I wouldn't normally do that. Whenever you start saying things like that, you've gone too long and you're not really getting that much benefit out of your practice anymore. And you do far better to start taking care of yourself, clean your room, make some food, take a nap, walk outside, touch grass even. These sorts of things would help refresh you and re-energize you so that the next time you approach and you play, you could do more. So it's a very personal answer. You have to find it out for yourself. But typically speaking, I think that a lot of us are not conditioned to be able to, you build the conditioning to be able to do longer sessions. And when you start, you need to really put in a lot of effort to practice and focus, and you'll tire very quickly. So
So let's talk about your stream. So the gist of your stream is basically, from what I've seen, you're playing right now at MMR of around Grandmaster level, right? 4.9. Is that correct?
yeah, roughly speaking.
And you've been able to maintain that for a few seasons now. You're doing a great job. And I notice you're attracting more and more viewers. Um, this tournament coming up, have you been training extra hard, or is it something that you feel like you can perform better on the day? What's the ultimate goal here? I mean, link it in with how you want to grow your stream as well. Are you trying to go to the next level, or I know you're very busy, but is this something that you can accomplish?
I would always, I would of course love if my stream growed and I was able to, because help spread the message about, hey, let's start to try to enjoy StarCraft as a sustainable way of life. Not something that we do until we get burned out and then we have to quit and leave the community so we can have mental health. Let's have mental health and StarCraft together, and let's enjoy and keep the game going as long as we can. Um, I would love for that to grow. It's not my primary focus right now, but I did want to make sure that I really wanted to perform my best at this Cheeseadelphia. So the competition is very fierce this year at Cheeseadelphia, but I have part of the reason I haven't streamed quite as much is because I have really focused on um, practicing. When I am playing, I'm playing with a lot of intentionality. I'm playing, I'm trying to get uh, help from people smarter than me, not, in order to show me, point out where my deficiencies are, and really try to address those deficiencies so that I can come in and give the best showing that I can on the Cheeseadelphia day. So I think I'll be in top form, the probably the peak form I've probably ever been in my life when I go to Cheeseadelphia. Um, whether or not whether or not that translates to results on the day, it's going to be a very fierce competition. So we'll have to see.
Now, the current StarCraft 2 scene, I know there are weeklies. I haven't played in quite a long time. But do you think that it's at a decent level where it is? I mean, we're promoting the game to grow more and more. We're promoting non-burnout. But it has been, from what I have seen, dying. I think it's resurging. What's your opinion on the state of the game?
I think people have been saying StarCraft dead game for a very long time, and the simple fact of the matter is, it depends on what you love about StarCraft and what you enjoy about StarCraft. Um, Many games, enter their golden era whenever the corporate sponsorship goes away and it starts to become like a community-run thing. And so, what I see right now is that StarCraft has shown that there is a very strong community that's going to try to keep the game going for as long as possible. On the backs. You aren't going to be able to support, and in fact, for a very long time, it's been very hard to support professional careers on StarCraft 2. So from that perspective, you may end up seeing less, if not like a complete destruction of like full time professional gamers, which is understandable. And that does mean that you probably will start to see less and less short term, like, growth in terms of like the overall skill of the game, because people will just be able to dedicate less time to it. But I do think that, you still continue to see people who are passionate about playing, people who are quite strong and are still pushing metas forward and evolving, um, as long as, long past the time um, when all corporate sponsorship and all like large money prize events are gone. So I think we might be entering an era where large events are not going to be as large anymore, and they're going to be a lot more community driven. But that's not necessarily a dead game. That's just a game in a different phase of its life.
Okay, just wrapping this up. What do you think about new players coming onto the game? Is there any way that you can recommend the game to non-players? I think we've kind of touched on it, but I think it's the best real-time strategy game made so far. So, what's your opinion on the game and picking up the game for somebody who hasn't seen this, maybe seeing this for the first time?
I think a lot of people who have not played real time strategy, um, like StarCraft, because there's lots of games that are categorized as real time strategy that are quite frankly nothing like StarCraft. It's a very intimidating environment to go into, but I think that there's this false belief when you're new to StarCraft that, it's an incredibly hard game, and which it is, but that I'm going to be playing against other people who have, are just going to crush me. And the simple fact of the matter is, you can learn very quickly how to control it. It's almost like it's like dancing or running, or um, it's something that like you can learn how to pilot StarCraft at a competent level, um, by yourself without ever having to go into a game with another person. So in turn, and if it really is a personal experience. If you're looking to say, well, I want to get a certain rank, and I just won't be happy if I don't get a certain rank. First of all, I would say that's probably not the best way to do it. But there are ways that you can basically be a diamond player within a week or two of you starting to play online games. You can take steps to like practice ahead of time and achieve that. Or if you're like, look, I don't actually care about the rank, I just want to play the game, but I just don't want to get like completely. I don't want to lose against these players that are much better than me. Well, in that case, I mean, if you just want to enjoy the game, like, okay, great, enjoy the game. And what we need to do is we need to start to look at refocus. What you're looking at is like, did you have a good game or not know whether you won or lost, and why are you focused on losing if you just want to play the game and enjoy. Like, let's focus on, let's focus on having new experiences, because that's what you get every time you hit ladder. Whenever there's a proxy, two gateways in your main that you didn't know were going to be there, a lot of people can see it as a very negative experience because they're like, this isn't the way the game was supposed to go. And I've certainly have been guilty of that too. But if you can reframe that experience to say like, oh wow, this was a completely different thing. I've never seen this before. Now that that has happened and I've got completely crushed, I can go back and look and think about this and just kind of like wonder, like, like you engage the strategic part of my brain and think, what should I have done differently? Refocus on that, not whether or not you won or lost a game, and that can lead to a much more positive experience. So know why you're playing, and why you're playing will then tell you how you should approach the game, what you should do, how much you should practice, when you should get on the ladder. But start with why you're playing the game, and once you know that, then you can start to approach in a healthy and positive way.
Yeah, and some players are going to be naturally better coming from gaming backgrounds, I think. But I just want to see if you agree that basically the community benefits as a whole from players who are dedicated and actively participating in the game and aren't just picking up the game and doing one strategy over and over again and calling it quits after a couple hours. It's a game that needs to grow, does it not?
Um, I'm not entirely sure the whole. I would agree that the community benefits from people actively engaging with the game. If someone's active engagement is to cannon rush all day, frankly, that's if that's what they enjoy about the game, they should be allowed to do that. And if it's causing, like, I'm not a cannon rusher, and I'm quite frustrated by cannon rushes often, but I would never say like that needs to be patched out of the game, because ultimately it is one of the things. If someone wants to get really good at making cannon rushes happen, then that's a valid way to play. And I think that part of the fun of StarCraft is saying, okay, if you want to walk down this path, then I can either choose to do a strategy that makes it completely impossible for you to walk down that path. So I can open with a 12 pool and just assume that you're going to cannon rush me, and that would hard counter. If you tried to cannon rush, I'd get Ravagers out and destroy it, immediately. And then I'll just accept that if you're not cannon rushing, then that's fine. Like, that's one valid way to play, and people don't do that because they're like, people play against Printf and they don't like cannon rushing, and they don't open 12 pool to like try to hard counter with Ravagers. Then I'm not sure what you're doing. Like, Printf is going to do that. Printf has a spreadsheet that has metagames, like it's in his spreadsheet. So he's accepted that because he's doing what he's doing, people can hard counter him. And so I'm kind of rambling here, but I do agree that people should engage the game. It's good if long-term engagement's good. I think that if you're getting upset or angry about the way that someone else is choosing to get engaged with the game, that's really more of an internal question, and think about to yourself, like, why are you having problems with this, and address those. Now, if people are like, I think, for instance, hacking, abusing, like abusive chat, people that are just generally not win trading. I think these are all problems that need to be addressed. And one of the things that I would love to do is, I would love to come up with a third party ladder system or some way so that people could start to so we could actually start to moderate the community against obvious abuses, um, because it's not happening within the BattleNet client right now. Um, so either get the BattleNet team back on supporting and actually moderating and making sure that we can clean up some of the things that are obviously cheating, hateful, those sorts of things, or have a community driven ladder, third party ladder system that can allow us as a community to moderate that. But there's a fine line between, um, you know, or rather, there's a line between. I don't even know if it's fine. There's a line between someone playing a playstyle that you don't like and you think is bad. I think that's a part of the game that you need to learn to accept, versus someone map hacking. That's not part of the game that you need to accept. And I think you so it depends on what you're asking when you ask that, I guess. But ultimately, yes, I agree that people being able to engage is good. Um, I also think that people should figure out what they like about the game and engage with that, and they should look towards engaging with that more, rather than getting tilted by how other people choose to engage with the game.
Okay, which brings me to my next question, and I'm gonna wrap this up. Some quick, just shooting off some questions here. Do you think, as an NA player, taking some time off from the NA server is a good thing to try the European server just to get a feel for the macro style of the game? Really
I think
quick.
that there's just as much macro on NA as there is cheese on EU, to be honest with you. Um, Not in, I guess the way I said that was weird. I don't really see a difference between the macroness and the cheesiness of NA versus EU, having played both servers. You find cheeses in EU, you find macro styles in NA. There is a much larger player base on EU at the moment, and as you get to the higher ends of skill brackets, there are more EU players at the higher ends of skill levels, so it's easier to find matches versus people who are actually play. And I will admit that you do tend to see a bit more off the wall builds from NA than you do EU. But ultimately, I think that there's not the you should play EU sometimes depending on the time of the day is probably when you should be playing a server. So if you're playing a server when
Okay.
EU is active, then I would go to EU. If you're playing at a time of day when NA is more active, I would go to NA. Um, it's the same, like everything that happens is the same game. I play both, and I really just base it on what time it. But I'm essentially the same MMR on both servers at the moment, so it's not. I think it's actually slightly harder to get MMR on NA right now, just because the player base is so small. Um, but yeah, so if you're a higher level player, and by higher level I mean 5K plus, you might consider switching to EU during the time periods that EU is active, because you're more likely to be able to find matches of appropriate skill levels on that server.
Okay, and we've got new maps for for these new sets of tournaments that are coming out right now. How happy are you with the new maps?
I am happy that there are new maps because it's more engagement. And again, I'm actually someone who I, for instance, like the fact that there's a 3 player map. As a player, as a competitive player, I'm really not happy about that, because it introduces a lot more randomness into the game than I'm personally comfortable accepting. However, I would prefer that we have new maps and 3 player maps if this is what the majority of the community is driving towards and wants. I would prefer that over people, and I prefer to play these new maps than to just have the community dry up because they're just not interested and they're not moving forward. So I would play on the same map. Like, I would literally play on the same map every game. That's the kind of player I am. I'm a min maxer. I'm an optimizer. I have no problem with the map pool staying stagnant. But I know that a lot of people aren't that way, so I'm perfectly happy to play on new maps. In whether or not I think the maps are, what the specifics of the balance are, they're never going to be so much that player skill level isn't ultimately the deciding factor. So
Now, do you think there needs to be a new patch along with the new maps, or is the game just as fun as it always has been?
again, I think that there's a lot that I would not have had gone through if I was God King of the Starcraft balance. That being said, nothing is in a state where it's unplay. Again, player skill is going to come through more so than anything else with the way that the game is right now. Um, and so, if there was no more patches, I would be fine. I think there probably is some tweaking that could be done. And so, if that tweaking happens, I'll be happy to learn the new meta.
And you bring up an important point about the game, is skill. Skill goes so unnoticed and under the radar on this game. There's so much to be learned and developed in order to win the game. Actions per minute, hotkeys, screen locations, all of it contributes to a package that is really to be cherished and a skill set that needs to be learned and developed that most people are ignoring because they maybe see this patch as being unfair for Zerg, for instance. Um, can you talk about the macro multitasking you think Zerg requires right now and the type of effort that needs to be given just to break the mold, if you will?
I think that macro well is probably the most true advice, um, and the least helpful advice that you can ever be given. So currently, right now, one of the things that I keep getting beaten on the head well is that my macro is not quite on point. And it's not the mechanics of the macro, but it's in some cases it's the mechanics. Looking at the mini map on time, looking at glancing up at my supply at the right time to make sure I don't get supply blocked or have the feel for that. And a lot of times it's like the decision making in the macro. Did I make the right thing? And a lot of times the right thing is making drones, unless you're sure that the right thing is something else. But a lot of times all I like many players will hesitate and, oh wait, maybe I'll build some units here. No, maybe okay, no, it should have been drones. And at that point, and that the delay makes it the wrong thing. Um, and it's very simple to macro well, if you will, but it's also extremely complicated. So there's a lot more where being able to jump around and do lots of stuff. Like people see Cyril has 450 APM, and they think, oh my god, I could never do that much. Like I need to like maybe mashing my buttons. I need to go here. I need to do that, and they start flailing their arms. It's kind of like swimming, where if you see someone who's drowning, they're going to be they're going to be flailing all over the place and they're going to be thrashing. They're doing lots of actions, but those actions aren't helping them, move anywhere. They aren't helping them propel themselves forward or keep their head above water. They are a little bit, but then they get, they're doing them so hard they get tired and eventually they go down. Whereas like if you look at like an Olympic swimmer swimming, they glide through the water and they're not doing a whole lot, and yet everything they're doing is in concert with achieving the outcome they want. And so I think that the better you get, the more it looks like you're not doing that much a lot of times. If you've ever watched Cheryl